A teenage girl goes missing on prom night, vanishing without a trace along with her date. But then, her mother walks into a laundromat and sees something shocking. Rebecca's fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the stack of freshly printed flyers from the young woman behind the counter at the print shop. The glossy paper felt cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the burning anxiety that had consumed her for the past month. "Thank you, Mia," Rebecca said, forcing a smile as she glanced down at the top flyer. Her daughter's face stared back at her, Zoe's senior portrait with her bright smile and confident eyes, taken just months before she vanished. The bold red missing text above her image still felt surreal, like something from a television drama rather than Rebecca's actual life. Mia, the print shop employee, who couldn't have been much older than Zoe herself, hesitated before handing over the receipt. Is this your daughter?" she asked, her voice soft with sympathy. Rebecca nodded, swallowing the lump that formed in her throat whenever she had to explain. "Yes, my daughter Zoe. She disappeared after her senior prom about a month ago." The words had become a script she'd recited countless times, yet they never became easier to say. "I'm so sorry," Mia said, her eyes widening. "I thought she looked familiar from the news. They're still looking for her date too, right? That boy, Deshawn." "Yes," Rebecca confirmed, tucking the flyers carefully into her messenger bag. "The police are focused on him now. They both vanished that night." Mia leaned forward slightly over the counter, lowering her voice. "I've heard people talking about it around town. Deshawn was one of the only black students at Ridgemont High, wasn't he?" Rebecca sighed heavily, her shoulders sagging under the weight of the town's prejudice that had shaped the narrative around her daughter's disappearance. "Yes, he was. And I've heard all the whispers too." "It must be hard," Mia said, genuine concern in her eyes. "The way people talk." "You have no idea," Rebecca replied, zipping her bag closed. "The local paper barely mentioned Deshawn in their coverage. It was all about Zoe, the beautiful blonde cheerleader who vanished. They painted her as the victim and him as—" She trailed off, unable to vocalize the ugly assumptions. "That's awful," Mia said, shaking her head. "The police initially refused to even investigate his family's claims that he was missing too," Rebecca continued, the frustration evident in her voice. "His mother had to fight just to get them to acknowledge that he might also be a victim. Meanwhile, I hear the whispers at the grocery store about how he must have convinced Zoe to run away to the city, or—" She couldn't bring herself to repeat the worse accusations. "Even some of Zoe's relatives have made comments about her getting mixed up with the wrong crowd," Rebecca added bitterly. "Deshawn was an honor student with a full scholarship to Cornell. He was going to study engineering, but some people in this town can't see past—" She gestured vaguely, not needing to finish the thought. Mia nodded sympathetically. "I hope they both turn up safe." "Thank you," Rebecca said, appreciating the young woman's kindness. "I should get going. These flyers won't put themselves up." Outside the print shop, Rebecca paused to take a deep breath of the spring air. The weather had turned warm and pleasant in the weeks since Zoe's disappearance, a cruel reminder that the world continued turning despite her personal tragedy. She pulled out the first flyer and a roll of tape from her bag, beginning the methodical task she'd performed countless times over the past month. Rebecca moved through downtown with practiced efficiency, placing flyers on community boards, in shop windows where owners had given permission, and on street poles at busy intersections. She'd covered this area several times already, but felt compelled to refresh the flyers, replacing those that had been damaged by weather or removed. Each flyer represented hope, slim as it might be, that someone might remember something, see something, or know something that could bring Zoe home. As she reached the corner of Maple and Main, Rebecca paused to tape a flyer to a lamppost. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street as she smoothed the tape with her thumb, ensuring the flyer would stay secure. When she stepped back to check her work, something across the street caught her eye. Through the large front window of Sparkle Clean, the combination laundromat and dry cleaner that had been a fixture in town for decades, Rebecca spotted a flash of familiar color. Her heart skipped a beat as she focused on a distinctive turquoise gown with a plunging neckline hanging in the press area. Rebecca froze, her breath catching in her throat. The dress was identical to the custom gown specially made for Zoe's prom, the one she'd been wearing the night she disappeared. Rebecca had helped her daughter select the design, a simple but elegant silhouette in that particular shade of turquoise that complemented Zoe's eyes. Squinting against the afternoon sun's glare on the window, Rebecca noticed something else that made her blood run cold. Even from across the street, she could see what appeared to be dark stains on the lower portion of the fabric. The discoloration was partially visible despite someone's apparent attempt to clean it. Rebecca's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the dress. It couldn't be a coincidence. The custom color, the distinctive design, the stains that looked horribly like dried blood. It had to be Zoe's dress. The dress her daughter had been so excited to wear on what should have been one of the happiest nights of her high school experience. Without hesitation, Rebecca stepped off the curb, her eyes never leaving the turquoise gown as she crossed the street toward Sparkle Clean. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as Rebecca entered Sparkle Clean, the sound at odds with the dread pooling in her stomach. The familiar scent of detergent and fabric softener filled her nostrils as she scanned the interior, her gaze immediately returning to the turquoise dress hanging in the press area. "Good afternoon," called a pleasant male voice from behind the counter. "How can I help you today?" Rebecca turned to see Harold Donovan, the middle-aged proprietor of Sparkle Clean. His silver-grey hair was neatly combed, and he wore a crisp navy blue apron over a white button-down shirt. She'd known Harold casually for years, exchanging pleasantries whenever she dropped off her dry cleaning, but had never had reason to look at him with suspicion until now. "Hello, Harold," Rebecca replied, trying to keep her voice steady as she moved closer to the dress. Now that she was inside, she could study it more closely, and her suspicions were confirmed. The distinctive plunging neckline, the simple, elegant silhouette, the exact shade of turquoise, it was identical to the dress she had helped Zoe select for prom. Her breath caught as she confirmed what she had feared from across the street. The dark stains on the lower half of the dress weren't watermarks or dirt. They appeared to be blood, dried blood that someone had attempted to clean but hadn't fully succeeded in removing. "I'm interested in that dress," Rebecca said, pointing to the turquoise gown while studying Harold's reaction. Harold's practiced smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Oh, that one. It's actually not for sale. It belongs to a customer." "I can see that," Rebecca said, moving closer to examine the fabric. "Those stains at the bottom, are they blood?" Harold's reaction was immediate. He quickly moved to the dress and removed it from the rack, keeping it out of Rebecca's sight. His hands trembled slightly as he handled the fabric, revealing his nervousness despite his attempt to appear casual. "Just finishing up the pressing on this one," he said, his voice higher than normal. "It'll be ready for pickup soon." "Harold," Rebecca said firmly, "that dress looks exactly like my missing daughter's prom dress, the one she was wearing the night she disappeared." Harold's face paled momentarily before he regained his composure. His eyes darted to the phone behind the counter, as if considering whether to call someone. "I need to know where you got that dress and why there's blood on it," Rebecca continued, her voice growing more insistent. Harold hung the dress on a separate rack behind the counter, positioning himself between Rebecca and the garment. "Mrs. Wilson, I understand you're going through a difficult time, but this dress belongs to a regular customer who drops off formal wear after events. I assure you, it's not your daughter's." "Then you won't mind if I take a closer look," Rebecca challenged, stepping toward the counter. Harold's demeanor shifted subtly. "I'm afraid I can't allow that. Customer privacy is very important in my business." "Who does it belong to?" Rebecca pressed. "If it's not Zoe's dress, you should have no problem telling me who it belongs to." Harold's rapid blinking and tight grip on the dress hanger suggested he was fabricating his story as he went along. "As I said, customer privacy is paramount. I can't disclose that information." As Rebecca became more insistent, Harold's demeanor transformed from professional to hostile. Fear visibly morphed into defensiveness as he realized his involvement might be exposed. His sudden aggression appeared motivated less by anger and more by self-preservation. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said, his voice hardening. "You're harassing me and interfering with my business." "Harold, please," Rebecca pleaded, her composure beginning to crack. "My daughter has been missing for a month. If that's her dress, it could help find her. Just tell me who brought it in." "I've told you all I can," Harold said firmly. "Now I need you to leave before I call the police for harassment." "Go ahead," Rebecca challenged, pulling out her phone. "Call them. I'll call Detective Morrison myself. He's been leading my daughter's case, and I'm sure he'd be very interested in this dress." Harold's jaw tightened. "Get out, now!" Rebecca could see that pushing further would only cause Harold to become more defensive. She needed to involve the police before he had a chance to dispose of the dress or warn whoever had brought it in. "Fine," she said, backing toward the door. "But this isn't over, Harold." Once outside, Rebecca immediately dialed Detective Morrison's number with shaking fingers. As the phone rang, she kept her eyes fixed on Sparkle Clean, watching for any sign that Harold might be trying to leave with the dress. "Detective Morrison," came the familiar voice on the other end of the line. "Detective, it's Rebecca Wilson," she said urgently. "I think I've found something connected to Zoe's disappearance. I'm at Sparkle Clean on Main Street, and they have a dress that looks exactly like the one Zoe wore to prom. There are what look like blood stains on it that someone tried to clean." "Mrs. Wilson, slow down," Morrison replied, his tone cautious. "You're at the dry cleaners?" "Yes, and Harold Donovan has Zoe's dress, I'm certain of it. He refused to tell me who brought it in and tried to hide it when I asked about the stains. You need to come right away before he gets rid of it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Okay, Mrs. Wilson, stay where you are. Don't go back inside or confront him again. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Please hurry," Rebecca urged, ending the call and retreating to her car parked down the street, her eyes never leaving the entrance to Sparkle Clean. Rebecca sat in her car, fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel as she maintained her vigil outside Sparkle Clean. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness, each second feeling like an hour as she anxiously checked her phone for updates from Detective Morrison. She watched the entrance intently, alert for any sign that Harold might be attempting to remove the dress or contact someone. Customers came and went, carrying laundry baskets and hanging bags of freshly pressed clothes, oblivious to the turmoil churning inside Rebecca. An hour passed before Detective Morrison's unmarked police car finally pulled up beside hers. Rebecca immediately got out to meet him, relief washing over her at the sight of his familiar face. Detective Morrison was a tall man in his early 50s with salt-and-pepper hair and tired eyes that had seen too many tragedies. He'd been assigned to Zoe's case from the beginning, and while Rebecca sometimes found his methodical approach frustrating, she appreciated his thoroughness. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted her with a nod, "tell me exactly what you saw." Rebecca quickly recounted her discovery of the turquoise dress and Harold's suspicious behavior when she inquired about it. "I'm certain it's Zoe's dress, Detective. The color, the style, it's too specific to be a coincidence, and those stains, they looked like blood." Morrison listened carefully, his expression neutral. "Let's go talk to Mr. Donovan together. Stay calm and let me do the talking, okay?" Rebecca nodded, following the detective across the street and back into Sparkle Clean. The bell jingled once more as they entered, and Harold looked up from behind the counter. His eyes widened momentarily at the sight of Rebecca with Detective Morrison before his features settled into a mask of professional courtesy. "Good afternoon, Detective," Harold greeted them with exaggerated politeness. "How can I help you today?" "Mr. Donovan," Morrison began, showing his badge, "I understand you may have an item of interest in our ongoing investigation into Zoe Wilson's disappearance. Mrs. Wilson tells me she saw a turquoise dress here that matches the description of what Zoe was wearing the night she went missing." Harold's smile remained fixed, but Rebecca noticed a slight twitch in his left eye. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Detective. Mrs. Wilson was quite upset earlier, understandably so, given her circumstances, but I'm afraid she's mistaken about the dress." "Would you mind if I take a look at it?" Morrison asked. Harold's smile widened and Rebecca felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. "I would show it to you, but it's no longer here. The owner picked it up." "What?" Rebecca exclaimed, unable to contain herself. "That's impossible. I was watching the shop." Morrison placed a calming hand on her arm before addressing Harold again. "When was it picked up, Mr. Donovan?" Harold's smugness was palpable as he replied, "About 20 minutes after Mrs. Wilson left. I have security footage I can show you if you'd like." "I would appreciate that," Morrison said evenly. Harold led them to a small office in the back of the shop. A desktop computer sat on a cluttered desk, surrounded by filing cabinets and shelves stacked with cleaning supplies. Harold sat down at the computer and pulled up the security footage, scrolling to the timestamp from earlier that afternoon. "Here we are," he said, turning the monitor so they could see. The black and white footage showed the front counter area of the shop. The timestamp indicated it was approximately 20 minutes after Rebecca had left. A teenage girl entered the frame, approaching the counter. Harold could be seen retrieving the turquoise dress and handing it to her in a plastic garment bag. The girl took the dress and left. Rebecca leaned closer, scrutinizing the grainy footage. The girl was approximately Zoe's age and similar build, but the quality was poor, making her facial features unclear. "As you can see," Harold said with a note of triumph in his voice, "the dress was claimed by its rightful owner." "Who is she?" Morrison asked. Harold shrugged. "Just a regular customer. I don't keep detailed records for simple dry cleaning jobs." "That's not Zoe," Rebecca insisted, though the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to be certain. "And why would someone pick up a dress with bloodstains on it without questioning it?" Harold's smile turned condescending. "Perhaps there were no bloodstains, Mrs. Wilson. Perhaps you saw what you wanted to see." He paused, his expression turning sympathetic in a way that made Rebecca's skin crawl. "Or perhaps your daughter isn't missing at all. Maybe she simply ran away with her boyfriend and doesn't want to be found." Rebecca felt her face flush with anger. "How dare you—" "That's enough," Morrison interrupted, placing a hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "Mr. Donovan, we'll need a copy of this footage for our investigation." "Of course," Harold replied, his cooperation now that he believed himself in the clear only adding to Rebecca's frustration. He copied the file onto a USB drive and handed it to Morrison. As they prepared to leave, Morrison took Rebecca aside while Harold busied himself with another customer who had just entered the shop. Rebecca walked out of Sparkle Clean with Detective Morrison, the afternoon sun still bright, but offering no warmth to counter the chill that had settled in her bones. The detective stopped beside his car, keys in hand, and turned to her with concern etched across his weathered face. "Let me drive you home," he offered, his tone gentle but firm. "You've had a difficult day." Rebecca shook her head. "I'm fine to drive, thank you." Morrison's expression made it clear he wasn't convinced. "Rebecca, I'm worried about you. This isn't the first time you've fixated on finding connections to Zoe in everyday objects." He hesitated before continuing. "First it was the social media account with a similar username, then the girl at the mall who wore her hair like Zoe's, and now this dress." "This was different," Rebecca insisted, though her voice lacked the conviction it had held earlier. "I know what I saw." "I understand how desperate you are for answers," Morrison said, his voice softening. "Anyone in your position would be. But these increasingly desperate behaviors aren't helping the investigation, and more importantly, they're not helping you." Rebecca crossed her arms defensively. "So what am I supposed to do? Just sit at home and wait for the phone to ring?" "Have you considered talking to Dr. Lyons at the community center? She specializes in grief counseling for families of missing persons." Morrison's suggestion was delivered carefully, as if he were navigating a minefield. "She could help you process what you're going through." "I don't need a therapist to tell me my daughter is still out there," Rebecca replied, her jaw tight with determination. Morrison sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Just think about it. The first session is free through the Victim Support Program." He handed her a business card with Dr. Lyons' information. "In the meantime, try to get some rest. I promise we're still actively investigating both Zoe and Deshawn's disappearances." Rebecca took the card reluctantly, slipping it into her pocket. "I need some time alone to process all this," she said, a half-truth that would allow her to execute the plan already forming in her mind. "But I'll consider the counseling." Morrison studied her face for a moment, professional skepticism mixing with genuine concern in his eyes. "Promise me you'll call if you need anything, day or night." "I promise," Rebecca assured him, forcing a small smile. Morrison hesitated before nodding and getting into his car. Rebecca watched as he pulled away from the curb, waiting until his vehicle disappeared around the corner before returning to her own car parked further down the street. Once inside, Rebecca didn't start the engine. Instead, she adjusted her position to keep Sparkle clean in view, determined to see if there was more to Harold's story than he'd revealed. She reclined her seat slightly to appear less conspicuous to anyone passing by, settling in for what might be a long wait. The afternoon stretched on as Rebecca maintained her vigil. She used the time to call several of Zoe's friends again, hoping against hope that someone might have heard something new. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial sympathy, awkward assurances that they would call immediately if they heard anything, and then a hasty goodbye. No one had seen or heard from Zoe or Deshawn since prom night. Rebecca ended her final call and checked the time, 5:47 p.m. She'd been sitting in her car for nearly 3 hours, and her back was beginning to ache from the uncomfortable position. Still, she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something about Harold's behavior and the convenient timing of the dress being picked up felt wrong. Her instincts as a mother, the same instincts that had alerted her when Zoe had a fever before symptoms appeared or knew when her daughter was hiding something, told her that Harold Donovan was lying. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the street took on the golden hue of early evening. Rebecca watched as neighboring businesses began closing for the day. The bookstore owner locked up at 6, followed by the bakery and the small boutique next to it. One by one, the surrounding shops turned off their lights and locked their doors as evening turned to night. Rebecca remained in her car, shifting occasionally to keep her legs from falling asleep. She'd come prepared with a bottle of water and some granola bars in her bag, having learned from previous stakeouts to bring supplies. The thought made her grimace. When had stakeouts become part of her routine? Perhaps Morrison was right about her increasingly desperate behavior, but what choice did she have? The police investigation seemed to be stalling, and every day that passed made it less likely they would find Zoe. The streetlights flickered on as darkness fell, casting pools of yellow light on the empty sidewalks. Traffic had thinned to occasional cars passing through, and Rebecca sank lower in her seat whenever headlights swept across her vehicle, not wanting to draw attention to herself. At 8:45 p.m., movement at Sparkle Clean caught her eye. Harold appeared in the front window, turning off the main lights. Rebecca straightened in her seat, watching intently as he moved around inside, presumably closing up for the night. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and Harold stepped out, keys in hand. He locked the door, tugging it once to ensure it was secure. Rebecca expected him to walk to his car, which she knew was parked in the small lot behind the building. Instead, Harold glanced up and down the street before walking toward the alley that ran alongside Sparkle Clean. Curious, Rebecca watched as he disappeared from view. She was about to get out and follow him when headlights appeared at the end of the street. A silver sedan approached slowly, its engine barely audible in the quiet evening. As it passed under a streetlight, Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. She recognized that car. It belonged to Principal Robert Whitaker from Ridgemont High School. The sedan turned into the alley where Harold had gone moments before. Rebecca's heart pounded in her chest as she considered the implications. Why would the high school principal be meeting with Harold Donovan after hours? And what did it have to do with the turquoise dress that looked exactly like Zoe's? Rebecca waited a few moments, her mind racing. This couldn't be a coincidence. Something was happening in that alley, and it might be connected to Zoe's disappearance. She needed to see what was going on. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, Rebecca quietly exited her car and moved toward the alley, staying close to the buildings to remain in the shadows. The spring night air was cool against her skin as she approached the corner, her heart hammering so loudly she feared it might give her away. Peering cautiously around the edge of the building, Rebecca spotted Harold and Principal Whitaker standing near the back entrance to Sparkle Clean. They were speaking in low voices, their breath visible as small clouds in the chilly night air. Rebecca crouched behind a large dumpster, straining to hear their conversation. Principal Whitaker, a tall man in his late 40s with thinning brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looked nervous as he handed Harold an envelope. "This should cover the laundry bill," he said, his voice just loud enough for Rebecca to hear. Harold accepted the envelope, thumbing through its contents before tucking it into his pocket. "It's too hot now," he replied, glancing around as if sensing they were being watched. "That woman coming in today asking questions, she recognized the dress." Whitaker nodded grimly. "I know, it will be done with soon." He reached into his jacket and pulled out another package, smaller than the envelope. "This is for tomorrow's pickup," he added, passing it to Harold. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air ran down Rebecca's spine. What did he mean by "it will be done with soon"? And what was being picked up tomorrow? The ominous exchange confirmed her suspicions that something sinister was happening, something connected to Zoe's disappearance. Harold took the package and quickly tucked it inside his coat. "Same arrangement as before?" "Yes," Whitaker confirmed. "I'll be in touch." With that, he turned and walked back to his car, leaving Harold standing alone in the alley. Rebecca pressed herself against the dumpster, holding her breath as Whitaker's footsteps approached. He passed by without noticing her, got into his car, and started the engine. As the sedan pulled out of the alley, Rebecca remained hidden until Harold had re-entered Sparkle Clean through the back door, locking it behind him. Once she was certain the coast was clear, Rebecca hurried back to her own vehicle, her mind racing with possibilities. The exchange she'd witnessed was clearly suspicious. The secretive meeting, the envelope of cash, the cryptic comments about things being too hot and something being done with soon. And most concerning of all, the mention of tomorrow's pickup. Rebecca started her car but didn't turn on the headlights, waiting until Whitaker's sedan was a good distance ahead before pulling out to follow him. She maintained a safe distance, hanging back far enough to avoid detection, but close enough not to lose him in the sparse evening traffic. As she drove, Rebecca pulled out her phone and called Detective Morrison, putting the call on speaker so she could keep her eyes on the road. The call went to voicemail after 4 rings. "Detective Morrison, it's Rebecca Wilson," she said after the beep, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I'm following Principal Whitaker from Ridgemont High. I just witnessed him meeting with Harold Donovan behind Sparkle Clean, exchanging money and talking about something being too hot because I recognized the dress. Whitaker also gave Harold a package for tomorrow's pickup. I'm currently heading north on Oakwood Drive following Whitaker's silver sedan. I think this is connected to Zoe's disappearance. Please call me back as soon as you get this." Rebecca ended the call and focused on maintaining her distance from Whitaker's car. They drove out of the town center, past the residential neighborhoods, and onto a rural road that led toward Lake Clearwater. The houses became more sparse, with large wooded lots separating them. After about 30 minutes of driving, Whitaker's brake lights flashed as he slowed and turned down a secluded driveway partially hidden by pine trees. Rebecca drove past the entrance, noting the unmarked gravel drive, before pulling over on the main road about 100 yards ahead. She turned off her engine and sat in the darkness, considering her next move. The property appeared to be one of the modest lake houses that dotted the shoreline of Lake Clearwater, popular as vacation homes for the more affluent residents of the area. Checking her phone, Rebecca saw no missed calls from Morrison. She debated waiting for his response, but Whitaker's words to Harold about tomorrow's pickup kept replaying in her mind. Her stomach tightened as she wondered what or who might be part of this pickup. The possibility that it could involve another student, or worse, something happening to Zoe, made her decision clear. She couldn't afford to wait any longer. Rebecca got out of her car, locking it quietly before slipping into the woods that lined the road. She moved carefully through the underbrush, making her way toward the lake house while staying hidden among the trees. The nearly full moon provided just enough light to navigate without using her phone's flashlight, which might give away her position. As she drew closer to the property, Rebecca could see it was a modest single-story lake house with a small dock extending into the water. A soft glow emanated from the windows, indicating Whitaker was inside. She paused at the edge of the tree line, gathering her courage and considering how to proceed. The rational part of her brain urged caution. She should wait for Morrison, call for backup, not put herself in danger. But the mother in her, the primal force that had driven her relentless search for Zoe, pushed her forward. If there was even the slightest chance her daughter was in that house, or that she could find evidence of what happened to her, Rebecca had to try. Taking a deep breath, she emerged from the trees and approached the house, moving from shadow to shadow with determination in every step. Keeping to the shadows, Rebecca circled the house, peering cautiously through each window. Most of the rooms were dark, but a soft glow emanated from what appeared to be a study at the back of the house. Crouching beneath the windowsill, Rebecca slowly raised her head just enough to see inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. The study walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, all of female students from Ridgemont High. Rebecca recognized several of the girls from Zoe's classes and cheerleading squad, but what truly horrified her was the prominence of Zoe's images among them. Her daughter's face appeared in at least 20 different photos, some clearly taken at school events, others appearing to be candid shots taken without Zoe's knowledge. Zoe walking to her car in the school parking lot, Zoe at a coffee shop with friends, Zoe at track practice. The display had the disturbing quality of a shrine, with Zoe's photos larger and more numerous than the others. Rebecca's stomach churned as she realized the implications of what she was seeing. Principal Whitaker had been stalking her daughter, documenting her movements, creating this twisted collection of images. Rebecca ducked back down, pressing a hand to her mouth to stifle the sound of her ragged breathing. She needed to find more evidence, something concrete she could show to Detective Morrison. Moving to the next window, she found a darkened bedroom with nothing unusual visible in the moonlight that filtered through the blinds. As she continued her circuit of the house, a muffled sound stopped her in her tracks. She held her breath, listening intently. There it was again, a dull thud, followed by what sounded like a voice, coming from below ground level. The house had a basement. Rebecca searched the perimeter until she found a small basement window near the back of the house, partially obscured by overgrown shrubs. She pushed the branches aside and peered in, but could see only darkness. Testing the window, she was surprised to find it unlocked. After a moment's hesitation, she pushed it open and with some difficulty maneuvered herself through the narrow opening. She landed with a soft thud on a concrete floor in what appeared to be a storage room. The space was cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and seasonal decorations. A single bare bulb provided minimal illumination, casting long shadows across the room. Rebecca stood perfectly still, listening for any indication that Whitaker had heard her entry. When no sound came from upstairs, she began to move carefully through the basement, following the muffled noises she'd heard from outside. The concrete floor was cold beneath her feet as she navigated around the stored items, making her way toward a narrow hallway at the far end of the room. The hallway was dimly lit by another bare bulb, revealing 3 doors, 2 on the left and 1 at the end. Rebecca approached the first door and tried the handle, finding it unlocked. Inside was a small bathroom, unoccupied. The sound came again, more distinct now, a soft thumping followed by what sounded like a muffled voice. It was coming from behind the door at the end of the hallway. Rebecca approached it cautiously, her heart racing. She tried the handle, but this door was locked. Glancing around, Rebecca noticed a key hanging on a small hook beside the door frame, partially hidden by a circuit breaker box. Her hands trembled as she took the key and inserted it into the lock, turning it slowly to minimize the noise. The lock clicked open, and Rebecca held her breath as she pushed the door inward. The room beyond was small, with concrete walls and no windows. A single bed stood against one wall, a small desk and chair against another. A bathroom door was visible in the corner, partially ajar. A lamp on the desk provided the only light, casting long shadows across the space. And there, sitting on the small cot in the corner of the room, was Zoe. Rebecca froze in the doorway, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her daughter, alive, was right in front of her. Zoe looked up, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized her mother. She appeared thinner than Rebecca remembered, her once vibrant face now pale and drawn. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore an oversized sweatshirt and pajama pants that hung loosely on her frame. "Mom?" Zoe whispered, her voice cracking with disbelief. "Zoe," Rebecca breathed, rushing forward to embrace her daughter. She wrapped her arms around Zoe's too thin body, feeling the girl tremble against her. "Oh my God, Zoe, you're alive, you're alive!" Zoe clung to her mother, her fingers digging into Rebecca's back as if afraid she might disappear. Tears streamed down both their faces as they held each other, the reality of their reunion overwhelming them. "I knew you'd find me," Zoe whispered, her voice muffled against Rebecca's shoulder. "I knew you wouldn't stop looking." Rebecca pulled back slightly, cupping her daughter's face in her hands, needing to see her, to confirm this wasn't a dream. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you?" Zoe shook her head, then hesitated. Not physically, but... She trailed off, her eyes darting nervously to the door. "Mom, we need to get out of here. He'll be back soon." "We will," Rebecca assured her, glancing around the room for anything they might need. "What about Deshawn? Is he here too?" At the mention of Deshawn's name, Zoe's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Deshawn," she repeated, her voice breaking. "He tried to save me in the parking lot after prom. Whitaker pulled out a knife and..." Her voice faltered. "There was so much blood on my dress. Whitaker forced us both here." She swallowed hard. "Mom, I don't know where Deshawn is now. I heard him that first night in another room, but then..." She shook her head, unable to continue. "It's okay," Rebecca said quickly, seeing her daughter's distress. "We'll figure it all out once we're safe. Can you walk? Can you make it to the car?" Zoe nodded, determination replacing some of the fear in her eyes. "I can walk. He lets me use the bathroom and sometimes the basement for exercise. He says he doesn't want me to get sick." The casual way Zoe described her captivity sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. "Okay, good. My car is parked just up the road. We'll go out through the basement window I came in through." As Rebecca helped Zoe to her feet, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The front door opening upstairs, followed by footsteps moving across the ceiling above them. "He's back," Zoe whispered, panic flashing in her eyes. "He always checks on me when he comes home." Rebecca looked around frantically for anything she could use as a weapon. Her eyes landed on a heavy desk lamp with a solid base. She unplugged it and gripped it tightly, positioning herself between Zoe and the door just as footsteps began descending the stairs to the basement. "Stay behind me," Rebecca whispered to Zoe, who pressed herself against the wall, trembling. The footsteps grew louder as they approached the basement hallway, each step bringing Whitaker closer to discovering them. The door swung open, revealing Principal Whitaker, his eyes widening in shock at the sight before him. "You shouldn't be here," Principal Whitaker said coldly, blocking the doorway. His eyes widened at the sight of Rebecca, clearly not expecting to find anyone in the basement room with Zoe. His initial shock quickly transformed into a calculating coldness that sent chills down Rebecca's spine. Rebecca positioned herself between Whitaker and Zoe, gripping the heavy desk lamp tightly. "Stay away from my daughter," she warned, her voice steadier than she felt. Whitaker's eyes darted between them, assessing the situation. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, his tone shifting to something almost conversational. "This is quite unexpected. I'm afraid you've misunderstood what's happening here." "I understand perfectly," Rebecca replied, not lowering the lamp. "You kidnapped my daughter and Deshawn after prom. Where is he? What have you done with him?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Whitaker's face. "Always about the boy, isn't it? Even now when your daughter is right here, you're asking about him." "Because his family deserves answers too," Rebecca shot back. Whitaker's expression darkened as he took a step into the room. "I think you should put down that lamp, Mrs. Wilson. We need to have a rational discussion about what happens next." "The only thing happening next is you moving aside so we can leave," Rebecca said firmly. Whitaker laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the small room. "No one's leaving this room except me." His hand moved to his pocket, pulling out a knife, The same knife, Rebecca realized with horror, that Zoe had described him using on Deshawn. "Mum," Zoe whispered, her voice trembling with fear as she pressed herself against the wall behind Rebecca. "Why, Robert?" Rebecca asked, trying to keep him talking while she looked for an opportunity to get past him. "Why Zoe? Why any of them?" She gestured vaguely upward, referring to the photos she'd seen in his study. The question seemed to please him, as if he'd been waiting for someone to ask. His expression softened as he looked at Zoe, a disturbing tenderness in his eyes that made Rebecca's skin crawl. "She's different from the others," he said, his voice taking on a dreamlike quality. "I've been watching her for months, waiting for the right moment. We have a special connection." "No, you don't," Rebecca said firmly. "What you have is a delusion. Zoe is a student, a child you were supposed to protect, not stalk and kidnap." Whitaker's face hardened again. "I am protecting her. From boys like Deshawn who would only use her and leave her. From a world that wouldn't appreciate her the way I do." "Deshawn cared about me," Zoe interjected, finding her voice despite her fear. "He was my friend. He tried to save me from you." "And where is he now?" Whitaker asked cruelly. "Gone because he wouldn't let you go." He shook his head as if Deshawn's death had been an inconvenience rather than a murder he'd committed. "I've been patient, waiting for the right moment to approach Zoe. I had it all planned. A gradual courtship after graduation when she was no longer my student." He gestured with the knife as he continued, his voice growing more animated. "But then I saw her at prom with him. The way he touched her arm, the way he looked at her, as if he had any right to her." Whitaker's face contorted with a mixture of rage and disgust. "I knew I had to act that night before it was too late." "So you followed them to the parking lot," Rebecca said, piecing together what Zoe had told her. Whitaker nodded. "I offered to drive Zoe home. I was polite, professional, the way a concerned educator should be, but Deshawn wouldn't let her go." His voice hardened. "He left me no choice." "You had every choice," Rebecca countered. "You chose to bring a knife to a school event. You chose to attack a student. You chose to kidnap my daughter." "I saved her," Whitaker insisted, his delusion fully on display. "Deshawn was bleeding all over her beautiful dress. I brought them here to clean her up, to explain everything. I tried to keep him alive for her sake, but he was stubborn to the end, kept trying to find a way to her even as he was bleeding out." He shook his head. "He died that first night." Zoe let out a sob behind Rebecca, the confirmation of her fears devastating her. Rebecca felt a surge of rage unlike anything she'd ever experienced. "You're going to prison for the rest of your life," Rebecca said, her voice shaking with fury. "For what you did to Deshawn, for kidnapping Zoe, for all of it." Whitaker laughed again. "Who will believe you?" "I'm a respected educator with 20 years of service. You're a grieving mother who's been seeing things that aren't there for weeks." Rebecca's stomach dropped as she realized the terrible truth in his words. Detective Morrison himself had dismissed her concerns repeatedly, treating her like an unstable, obsessive parent. She tightened her grip on the lamp, knowing she and Zoe would have to fight their way out. Whitaker advanced toward them, knife extended. "Now this can end one of two ways. Either you both come quietly or—" He was interrupted by the sudden wail of police sirens in the distance, growing louder by the second. Whitaker froze, his eyes widening with alarm. "That's the police," Rebecca said, a surge of hope giving her strength. "I left Detective Morrison a detailed voicemail with your name and this location." Whitaker's face paled, the reality of his situation dawning on him. In his moment of distraction, Rebecca swung the lamp with all her strength, aiming for his knife hand. The heavy base connected with his wrist, and Whitaker howled in pain as the knife clattered to the floor. "Run!" Rebecca shouted to Zoe, pushing her toward the door as she kicked the knife across the room. Whitaker recovered quickly, lunging for Rebecca and grabbing her by the hair. She cried out in pain but managed to swing the lamp again, this time connecting with his shoulder. He stumbled backward, giving Rebecca and Zoe enough space to push past him into the hallway. They ran toward the storage room where Rebecca had entered through the window, but Whitaker was close behind them. As they reached the room, Rebecca's phone fell from her pocket, clattering loudly on the concrete floor. She didn't stop to retrieve it, focusing only on getting Zoe to safety. "Through the window," Rebecca urged, helping boost her daughter up. Zoe scrambled through the opening, then turned to reach back for her mother. Before Rebecca could follow, Whitaker grabbed her ankle, yanking her backward. She fell hard on the concrete floor, the impact knocking the wind from her lungs. Whitaker loomed over her, his face contorted with rage. "You've ruined everything," he snarled, reaching for a nearby shelf where tools were stored. His hand closed around a screwdriver. Rebecca kicked out desperately, her foot connecting with his knee. Whitaker grunted in pain but didn't release her. Outside, the police sirens were right outside the house now, and the sound of car doors slamming could be heard. In a last desperate attempt to alert the officers to their location in the basement, Rebecca reached up and pulled on a tall bookshelf beside her. It teetered for a moment, before crashing to the floor with a thunderous noise that echoed through the basement. Whitaker looked up in alarm as footsteps pounded on the floor above them, followed by shouts of "Police! Open up!" Detective Morrison burst through the basement door, his weapon drawn and flashlight illuminating the chaotic scene before him. "Police! Don't move!" he shouted, the beam of light settling on Whitaker, who was still looming over Rebecca, screwdriver in hand. Whitaker turned to face the new threat, momentarily distracted by the detective's sudden appearance. Rebecca seized the opportunity, grabbing a fallen hammer from the toppled bookshelf and striking Whitaker's arm with all her strength. He cried out in pain, dropping the screwdriver as he stumbled backward. "Hands up!" "On your knees now," Morrison commanded, his weapon trained steadily on Whitaker. Two uniformed officers appeared behind him, their weapons also drawn. Whitaker, realizing he was cornered, slowly raised his hands. His face twisted into an expression of indignant disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend how his carefully constructed world had collapsed so quickly. "This is a misunderstanding," he began, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he likely used with difficult students. "I was just—" "On your knees," Morrison repeated, cutting him off. "Now." As Whitaker reluctantly complied, the officers moved forward to handcuff him. Rebecca scrambled to her feet and rushed to the window, where Zoe was peering in anxiously. "Mom, are you okay?" Zoe called, her face pale with fear. "I'm fine," Rebecca assured her, though her heart was still racing. "It's over, sweetheart. The police are here." Morrison approached Rebecca after ensuring Whitaker was secured. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes quickly assessing her for injuries. "Just some bruises," Rebecca replied, her voice shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "But Zoe, she's been held captive here, and Deshawn." Her voice broke. "Whitaker killed him. He admitted it." Morrison's expression darkened. "We'll get you both out of here. There's an ambulance on the way." He turned to one of the officers. "Johnson, help Mrs. Wilson and her daughter. Peters, stay with the suspect." As the officer helped Rebecca through the window, Whitaker continued to protest his innocence. "I was helping her," he insisted, his voice rising with desperation. "She wanted to be here. Tell them, Zoe. Tell them about our special connection." Zoe, now safely in her mother's arms outside the house, turned away from the window, burying her face against Rebecca's shoulder. "Don't listen to him," Rebecca murmured, stroking her daughter's hair. "It's over. He can't hurt you anymore." Detective Morrison emerged from the house minutes later, followed by the officers escorting a handcuffed Whitaker. In the harsh glare of the police cruiser headlights, the principal looked smaller somehow, his authority stripped away to reveal the disturbed man beneath. As they led Whitaker to a police car, he continued to insist he was helping the girls, not harming them. "You don't understand," he called out to no one in particular. "Everything I did was for her protection. She needed me." Rebecca held Zoe close as they watched him being placed in the back of the cruiser. Morrison approached them, his face grim but relieved. "The ambulance will be here any minute," he said. "They'll want to check you both at the hospital." Rebecca nodded, unable to take her eyes off her daughter, still hardly believing she had found her alive. "What about Deshawn?" she asked quietly, not wanting to upset Zoe further but needing to know. Morrison sighed heavily. We'll search the property at first light, if what Whitaker said is true about burying him in the woods." He trailed off, not needing to finish the thought. "He tried to protect me," Zoe said softly, her voice hoarse from crying. "Deshawn, he tried to stop Whitaker, and that's why—" She couldn't continue, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "We'll make sure his family knows that," Morrison assured her. "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth." The ambulance arrived, its red and blue lights joining the police cruisers in illuminating the lakeside property. As paramedics approached with blankets and medical kits, Morrison pulled Rebecca aside. "After I got your voicemail, I also obtained an emergency search warrant for Sparkle Clean," he explained. "We found evidence that Harold had been cleaning blood from Zoe's dress and helping Whitaker cover up Deshawn's murder. He's already in custody. I found you after tracing your phone's location." Rebecca nodded, processing this information. "The dress, that's how this all started. If I hadn't seen it—" "You never gave up," Morrison said, genuine respect in his voice. "When everyone else thought you were seeing connections that weren't there, you kept pushing. You saved your daughter's life." Rebecca nodded gratefully. "Thank you for coming when you did." "I should have taken your concerns more seriously from the beginning," Morrison admitted. "I'm sorry about that." As the paramedics examined Zoe in the back of the ambulance, Morrison approached with a gentle expression. "I know this is difficult, but if you feel up to it, could you tell us what happened that night after prom? Any details might help us build our case against Whitaker." Zoe looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly and took her hand. Drawing a deep breath, Zoe began. "After prom, Deshawn and I were walking through the parking lot when Principal Whitaker approached us. He insisted on giving me a ride home." Her voice was steadier now, the safety of her mother's presence and the distance from immediate danger allowing her to speak more clearly. "He was acting strange," she continued. "He focused entirely on me, barely acknowledging Deshawn was there. When Deshawn asked why the principal was at prom so late, Whitaker's whole demeanor changed." Rebecca squeezed her daughter's hand as Zoe recounted the horrific details. "Deshawn could tell something was wrong. He stepped between us, told Whitaker he'd drive me home instead. That's when—" Her voice broke. "That's when Whitaker pulled out a knife. Deshawn tried to protect me and Whitaker stabbed him in the side." Morrison nodded grimly, taking notes as Zoe continued. "There was so much blood," Zoe said, her eyes distant as she relived the memory. "Whitaker forced me to help get Deshawn into his car. That's how my dress got stained. I was holding Deshawn, trying to stop the bleeding while Whitaker drove us here." Rebecca felt sick as she imagined the scene, her daughter witnessing such violence, Deshawn injured while trying to protect her. "During the drive, Deshawn kept drifting in and out of consciousness," Zoe continued, her voice breaking. "When we got here, Whitaker locked me in this room. I could hear Deshawn in another part of the basement that first night. His voice was weak, but he was alive. He was calling my name." Rebecca's heart ached for both teenagers, for Deshawn, who had tried to protect her daughter, and for Zoe, forced to witness such trauma. "By morning I couldn't hear him anymore," Zoe finished, wiping tears from her face. "Every time I asked about him, Whitaker would just say I shouldn't worry about him anymore, that Deshawn was gone, and it was just the two of us now." Morrison closed his notebook, his expression solemn. "Thank you, Zoe. Your testimony will be crucial in making sure Whitaker never hurts anyone again." As Morrison walked away, Rebecca caught his eye. The detective's face held a mix of professional determination and personal regret. In that silent exchange, Rebecca found a measure of closure about their previous interactions. The dismissal she'd felt, the frustration of not being believed, it hadn't been personal, just the caution of a man who'd seen too many desperate families grasping at impossible hopes. Now that same methodical approach would ensure justice for both Zoe and Deshawn. Some wounds would take time to heal, but in this moment, Rebecca was simply grateful that her persistence had led to this outcome, against all odds. In the days that followed, the investigation revealed the full extent of Whitaker's disturbing obsession. The search of his lake house uncovered not only the photo collection Rebecca had seen, but journals detailing his fixation on Zoe and other female students dating back years. Most disturbing of all was the recovery of Deshawn's body, buried in a shallow grave in the woods behind the house, just as Whitaker had claimed. The evidence from Whitaker's home showed collections of photos of other female students from previous schools where he had taught, suggesting a pattern of behavior that had escalated over time. Investigators believed Zoe was his first attempt at acting on his obsessions, with Deshawn's presence unfortunately escalating the situation to violence. Harold Donovan, facing charges as an accessory after the fact, quickly turned on Whitaker, revealing how the principal had brought him the blood-stained dress to clean the morning after prom, claiming it was for a student emergency. Harold admitted to helping stage the fake pickup of the dress when Rebecca had recognized it, using his teenage niece to pose as the owner. The truth about what happened that prom night changed the community's perception of both teenagers. The whispers at the grocery store and sidelong glances at Deshawn's family were replaced by profound remorse and support. The local newspaper, which had initially focused solely on Zoe's disappearance, now ran front-page stories about Deshawn's heroism, featuring quotes from his teachers and friends about his character and promising future. 1 week after Zoe's rescue, Deshawn's family held a memorial service that filled the community center beyond capacity. Photos of Deshawn throughout his life lined the front, from childhood to his recent prom portrait. Zoe insisted on speaking despite her parents' concerns. Standing at the podium with trembling hands, she began, "Deshawn Johnson was my friend. We weren't dating, as some assumed. We went to prom as friends to enjoy our senior celebration without romantic expectations." She continued, her voice strengthening. "Deshawn had been accepted to Cornell with a full scholarship to study engineering. He dreamed of designing sustainable housing for underserved communities. When Principal Whitaker approached us that night, Deshawn sensed danger immediately and stepped between us without hesitation. He sacrificed himself trying to protect me." Fighting tears, she gripped the podium. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that sacrifice. Deshawn mattered. His life mattered, and I promise his death will matter too." As Zoe returned to her seat, Deshawn's mother rose to embrace her. The barrier between them, built of prejudice and misunderstanding, had shattered in their shared grief. After the service, Detective Morrison approached them outside. "The district attorney is pursuing first-degree murder charges against Whitaker," he said quietly. "Harold Donovan is cooperating fully. Neither will see freedom for a very long time." Walking to their car, Zoe paused. "Mum, I heard Ridgemont High is planning a memorial scholarship in Deshawn's name." "That's good," Rebecca replied softly. "It's the least they can do." "I want to help with it," Zoe continued, determination in her voice. "Make sure it goes to students who show the same courage and integrity he did." Rebecca embraced her daughter, recognizing in Zoe's words the first step in her long healing journey. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Deshawn's legacy deserves to live on." Together they walked to their car under a clear spring sky. Rebecca knew healing would take time, but as she watched her daughter's determined steps, she saw the resilience that would carry them forward. Honoring Deshawn's memory not by how he died, but by how courageously he had lived.